Good morning and welcome to the Developer Study Group number 2. We're going to dive in here today we're going to talk about UI components. And there's a lot to talk about, and I am really excited to dig into this area simply because it's the one area that everybody hates to talk about. So frankly, for me, I like to do things that, or I like to talk about things that seem difficult or obtuse to understand. I had a interesting experience this past week. My brother invited a couple of us out to go skiing in Colorado, and never been skiing in my life. I've never done rollerblading or ice skating or anything like that. It was a great opportunity for me to do something that, from a physical perspective, I've just never done before. It was challenging. It was difficult. And honestly, after 2 days of skiing, I wasn't that great, but it was such a good lesson and an opportunity for me to, again, face something as I am at the top of a slope, one of those green slopes that as you look down, it seems really steep, and to be able to face your fears and to just work your way through that. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing today here in our developer study group with UI components. It might be somewhat, I don't think any of us would classify it as a fear in perspective there, but we would say it's probably uncomfortable. It's something that we really don't want to dive into that deeply because, well, we just don't understand it. But we'll figure all that stuff out today. All right, very good. It's exciting to have you all here. Why don't you, if you're here, just drop in maybe what you've been studying this past week. That's always interesting to see and inspiring and motivating for all the rest of us to see. Now, one thing to note is if you are studying, which I hope you are, feel free to use the Today I Studied Slack channel. That's really motivating, inspirational for everybody to see that. What you've been studying, and it might encourage somebody else to get studying too. Because again, after all, if we're not studying, we're not making progress. And in fact, as we've talked about in the past, we are actually making backwards progress, and none of us wants that. All right. Oh, yes, good. We have a couple people eating lunch here. All right. We're just getting started out in the day here. It's 8 o'clock here. So, I just ate a little breakfast myself. Very good. India and I know UK here and Northern Ireland, and I think the West Coast, Ann Arbor. Yep. All right. Very good. Excellent. Well, let's jump in and do a quick review of where we were at last week, and then we will dive into UI components for this week. All right. Let me pull this up. Okay. The user story that we're going to be reviewing here today is, as an admin, I wish to see a list of exported orders so that I can quickly review the notes on each. In other words, we are going to build a UI component that displays the list of exported orders. It's going to be pretty easy to do that, and I say pretty easy. For those of you who have never built a UI component, it might seem a little bit difficult, but I'm going to make that process super, super easy. And again, we are doing a practical project here in the effort, or as we're looking to focus in on preparing for this test. There is a myriad of ways we can take it beyond this, and a ton of deep customization. In fact, we've been working on a project recently for one of our merchants, and actually, the previous developers on this project, they tried to get UI components and forms to fit into and do everything. But that's just not good for user experience all the time. Sometimes it works, and in the case of what we're doing today, it works. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is, don't let this be your ceiling. This is just the stepping stone to further and deeper customizations that you can do in the admin panel. But this is also what is required to know in order to pass the test. Especially focusing on expert developer here today. Those of you who are looking to take professional developer, there is very little, if any, conversation about UI components on your tests. However, Those of you going for professional developer, it is my recommendation that you eventually go for expert developer. And in fact, if you get at least a 75% on the professional developer, you are pretty much ready to go take the expert developer with some extra study. So again, all of this is, I view all of you as, again, preparing for expert developer at one time or another. JavaScript developer also has a lot of conversation about UI components. So very important to focus in on this section here today. All right, so the overview of our technical requirements for this project. Number one, view all exported orders. Notes must be visible in the grid. Store configuration option to only show completed orders. Capacity for only specific administrators to see this panel. So we're focusing in on requirement number one today. View all exported orders. The notes must be visible in the grid. That's what we're going to be working on with the grid today. We already pretty touched on store configuration. Was that 3 weeks ago? Maybe was it 4 weeks ago? Wow. With my illness that I had, and that I think we ended up skipping 1 week of this developer conversation, or deferring it. Capability for only specific administrators to see this panel. This would be defined in the ACL. And so again, we've already pretty well touched, I think, on that as well. All right. Here is what we've done, and you'll notice that these six items here, most of them are done. Those are the easy items. Now we need to build our grid UI component. That is going to be the more difficult challenge. So the first thing we need to consider in this is, what does the test want us to know? What does the test expect from us? And while the study guide here talks about the form structure, form templates first, we're going to jump into grids, containers, and elements first, simply because that's what is, how do I say this? It works better in our project flow. So we can eventually get to the form structure templates, but again, most of that actually is pretty similar. Let's get to a question of from Pawan. Will studying expert developer help me to pass professional developer exam? Oh, definitely. Absolutely. And remember, expert developer is simply a more difficult version of professional developer. So that's pretty much all it is. It's just a more difficult version of professional. Andy, is this more one or the other, customizing Magento UI or developing with admin HTML? This is more developing with admin HTML. However, a lot of these concepts do in loosely flow over to the other UI components, meaning checkout. If you want also another great resource for learning more on the JavaScript side, less on the actual XML UI component side, which the XML UI component side is more what the test expects you to know. The Mage 2 TV VNI Cop also has some really great resources on diving in, understanding like knockout and how import and export supports work and that stuff. We're going to hopefully have just a couple minutes to touch on that as well today, as that ties into creating custom columns or custom form fields. All right, so look at the grid workflow. How is the data provided to the grid or form? How can this process be customized or extended? And remember also, this is not the test does not expect you to know, here is the exact syntax, and you're expected to know the difference between a couple characters or two different words in a XML construct. It's more general steps and ideas. And honestly, I think those are actually harder to understand than just or harder to remember than just those, again, words in XML, right? We can memorize those, but the test is expecting us to know, how does all these things fit together? And that's what we're going to be working to figure out. And this is ultimately what we're doing today. Describe how to create a simple form and grid for custom entity. Right there. That's what we're doing. So without further ado, I think we should just jump in and figure out how to do this. Yep. All right. That's all the slides I had to talk about today, simply because we're going to be getting in and doing more of this, taking care of this. So let's jump in and review as far as where we are at. Remember, we created a new menu item, which links to a new controller. we have exported orders right here. So the first, oh boy, do we want to create our, well, I think let's go ahead and create our, make sure we have our view layout. Nope, not order export. We need to go create our layout XML handle. So how do we do that? Well, there's quite a few different ways to do that. I guess probably the easiest is let's use this module CMS, well, the CMS module as our starting place for our grid. If we come over here to content pages, and we'll specifically using the pages one here, my goal is to show you today how to copy this, repurpose it, and learn exactly what's going on at the same point. Writing a UI component from scratch, there's just a lot of stuff that needs to be added in there, ton of boilerplate, and it's difficult, right? So here, our goal is to create this from the CMS page UI component. Let's get started. So this is what we're looking at right here. We're gonna basically harvest this and use this as our own. We come into module CMS. If we need to first create our layout XML file. So we would come into view, admin HTML layout. I think all of you should be pretty familiar with this process of how the layout handles work. CMS page index. We're gonna copy this file up into, and we'll create view admin HTML layout. View admin HTML layout. We're going to drop this file in here, although we're going to want, well, we'll drop it in, we will rename it. Okay, so what is the naming convention for this? The route is, we have the route ID. This is the first part of this, and ultimately, this CMS here is the route ID for the CMS module. We were doing some experimentation last time. If you want to go hear that whole conversation, it was really fascinating. Feel free to go back and look at our, I had, excuse me, I had called it 2.5, and it was about, 3 or 4 weeks ago, our first developer study group. All right, so we're going to rename this. This first part is view export ID, and that comes from route ID right here. All right, the next thing is we come into the controller admin HTML directory for routes in the admin HTML area, and we can combine view and index. View is the directory that is inside of admin HTML. If there's multiple directories, view / some other directory / index.php, those would be concatenated with an underscore. But in this case, we don't, just view / or view index.php. So we're going to change this to be view, and we're going to leave this alone because we have that maps out to our index.php file here. Very easy. All right, so we come in here, update handle styles. We do not need that. Reference container name is content. UI component name is CMS page listing. Pawan asked, will it be page index? Actually, yeah. So it'll be the view and then index here. So view is the directory that maps to here, and index maps out there. So that is how those map together. All right, so CMS page listing. If you're like me, you have a bazillion tabs and files open, most of which are unnecessary, or they were necessary at one point in the day, and now they are no longer necessary. Okay. Yes, so we have our view export ID, view index. Now let's come back, and it says UI component name is CMS page listing. One trick you can do for this is most references or handles in Magento are found, have a matching file name. So in this case, we can just hit the shift key twice in PHP Storm, and it pulls up the CMS page listing. So let's observe the file path here. The file path is vendor Magento module CMS. Yep, that's where the CMS module resides. View admin HTML UI component. Okay, so CMS page listing is a UI, fits in that. And we have this, looks like an absolute barfing of text all over the page. So how are we going to sort this out? What are we going to do here to figure out what we need to swap out, what we need to change, et cetera, et cetera? Well, it's easier than you think. Here's what I suggest. Let's copy in this entire file into a new directory, UI underscore component. We will create a new XML file here. But what do we name it? One thing to note with UI components is that consistency is very important. Consistency of naming. So if whatever we name this, it will have a trickle-down effect to every area of this UI component and how it is referenced in our layout XML file. So I'm going to call this order export list. We could call it like there's CMS page listing. The name really doesn't matter. Call it whatever you want. And I have yet to see a place where the actual name matters. So except for you need to be consistent. So order export list.xml. And I'm going to paste in the contents of this file here. Now, and I clean out the copyright. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to wire this up to our layout XML file. And again, the name is very important. So this is at order export list. Literally, this is the file name except for XML that you placed inside of UI component. That's as simple as it is. Let me forgot to open my terminal prompt here. All right, let's. Where is that window? There we go. Okay. Try to center it there. We'll just do this. Okay. We'll clear the cache. Now, without knowing anything of what is happening here in this particular UI component, maybe you know what's going on, but maybe you don't. Let's come over here and click on exported orders, and let's see what happens. It takes just an extra minute because I cleared the cache. Sure thought I disabled Xdebug. Maybe I didn't. Well, in the meantime, while that is loading up, though, there, of course, that's all I have to say. And it starts loading. Okay. Let's do a quick refresh here to see what, okay, oops, wrong one there. Items, okay. So we're running into a little bit of an error, but you can see the UI component is starting to be configured. Unfortunately, the error is not displayed for us. So I'm guessing there is some type of configuration issue. That's okay. I was hoping it was going to load up as it was. So let's start running through this process and seeing exactly how this works. So the first step I always do is I search for, and so we're going to get it configured, and then we're going to dive into some more of the details. But at least I want you to see what parts and steps are necessary in order to get this UI component working. So first thing I do is I always come through and I search for the name of the old UI component, and I swap that out with the name of the new UI component. Order export list. And you'll notice that it changes out quite a few different places here. All right, order export list. That was pretty easy. Now we have spinner. Let's actually just search for now CMS page. There's a couple of those references, and we'll just swap that out for order export. Okay, the ACL resource. So again, we're just trying to work down through this, search and replace whatever we can. Oops, I do see our index field. This is page ID. Now we should probably go and check out what we should put in there. And export, sales order export. The ID, it would just be the ID field. So what I see here is this is the storage config. This is the index field. This is the name of the ID field. So we want to make sure to change that out. ACL resource. We can change this out to be Swift Order study guide. Yep. View exported orders. Okay. Data provider. So the data provider does exactly what it says it's supposed to do, and that is to provide data to this UI component. Let's go and see what the CMS page data provider does, and we'll see what we want to, how we want to accommodate that in ours. Okay. So it says prepare metadata. So if it is allowed to CMS save, so the save action is allowed in the ACL resources, then we are going to metadata is enabled is oh, excuse me, I didn't see the negator here. If it is not allowed, then we're going to turn enabled editing off. So yeah, that's pretty simple. We could set a breakpoint here, but I'm not necessarily worried about this as much. Maybe we'll build something out on our end here. Add filter pool, etc., etc. Okay, so what we can do is what I'm going to suggest we do is we're going to extend this class, and usually this goes into, as we see. Can you see or can you not see? Nope, you can't see. I try to maximize screen real estate for you all. This goes into the UI component directory, and it's usually named data provider. So let's go do that ourselves. All right. It's just a little tip that I always like to do. I always alias classes. It allows me to keep things consistent inside my class, and I really, really do not like how long some of these get. All right, so with that said, let's copy our new data provider out. Again, it's not going to do anything fancy, and in fact, you can drop this reference in as the data provider. However, I am doing this in anticipation that we are going to want to create our own customizations here in the future. So we'll clean that out. All right, request field name. This is the field name that is sent or referenced in requests, like fetching the ID. And then, I'm not 100% sure why they give you control over that, but they do. Primary field name. This is the field name that, again, comes from the data. So in the CMS page, we see our page ID column here. But in our order export, it's just ID. So we're going to change this out to be ID. All right, this is the toolbar area. So this basically defines whether the bookmark, and all of these are referencing other UI components. So we could go find the bookmark UI component, the columns control, et cetera, et cetera. So we're not going to mess with this too much at this point. Filters, settings, templates, filters. Don't think we need to touch any of this stuff. Again, there's a lot of boilerplate here. Filter select. All right. So here is the first option. First visibility of this. And I just lost the name of it. Where you can swap out the name of, or where you, the replacement. That's right. The replacements for filters, or for in JavaScript. So basically, Magento sees this signature, this dollar sign squiggly brace, and open and close of that, and it swaps everything out inside of that for the JavaScript. And this dollar sign reference is this, so it's basically like saying in JavaScript, this dot parent name. So what is parent name? Well, it's not present here in this UI component. However, what this will reference is the name of the parent UI component. So it's going to be fetching it from the parent. So filter select is inside of filters, and I believe it will be referencing this filter here. But yeah. All right, so inside of here, we have our filter select for store ID. The store ID, and actually, I'm not 100% sure as I'm looking at this, whether this is listing or filter listing toolbar. I think it is our order export list UI component, I think. Okay, so store ID. This allows us to filter down our CMS backend CMS page. What pages are listed per store. And actually, this is filtering out the CMS page store. So we're not going to need to deal with this literally at all. In fact, I can delete it. But this does bring up a couple of important concepts to understand when it comes to UI components. Number one is the data scope. This references the data that is coming in from our data provider. So this is saying this is associating the specified data for this filter for this UI component. It is coming from this data provider, this key in this data provider. Imports. This is a really interesting and underused segment of this functionality. And again, VNI Cop in his MageTV class dives into this with some really great examples. And one of my favorite things of how he does it is he takes these UI components, on the JavaScript side, and builds very, very, very basic components, and then shows how all of this works together. So this is linking, or this is importing from another source, and again, we see our JavaScript evaluator. I guess I think there's another better term for it, and it escaped me. But evaluating this JavaScript $.index, and it is getting the visible attribute from this location. Okay. So so that's this import is a very, very handy feature for this. So basically, you're referencing data from somewhere else in our UI component structure. Coming down, and actually in this case, we are going to delete this out because we do not need a store ID filter in our case. Mass action. All right. Are you sure you want to delete this? The selected items. And I don't think we actually need a mass action either, simply because, but it's good to reference and understand how this works. So we'll just do a quick evaluation of this, and then we'll move on. So mass action, it is the checkbox, and I can show you exactly. Components, pages. This is the mass action on the sidebar, and these actions that we are seeing right here is what is defined, is how we define this list. So ultimately, it is, yes, so basically we can define these actions. We can have a confirmation dialog box. We can send the value to a specific path or a URL. To our mass delete, we can just take a quick look at that. Okay, that's not pulling it up how I wanted it to. Let's see here. Controller, admin HTML, page, mass, delete. All right, so we see that we're getting this right here in the filter. Okay, module UI component component mass action filter. So basically, this is how you load in the values that were sent to you. And I think, yes, request, get param, selected param, excluded param. So it kind of does all the filtering, because ultimately you can click checkboxes on one page, go to the next page, and then click more checkboxes, and then click delete. So there is some capability that is needed to be addressed here. So this filter class helps you be able to filter out for mass action. And you'll see that filter get collection, and you're passing in I'm confident this is the CMS, page collection factory. All right, so I don't think we're going to need disable. Basically, yes, again, same concept there, except there is no confirmation dialog. enable. And we have one interesting aspect for edit, the callback. So we're basically, and I've actually never seen this functionality. I've never even used this edit functionality. So I'm actually curious to know when selecting multiple and clicking edit, how does that work? Okay. Honestly, that's worthless. But whatever. If one's going to edit it, well, maybe actually you'd want to go through and change multiple columns at once. I don't know. Whatever. All right. So the callback. So we have a couple of aspects here. We have our target and we have the provider. So order export list, that is the name of this UI component. Order export columns editor. Now let's see if we can go find where that columns editor is. I always like it when I search for something and I see at least 2 results. That means we're going to find it. Child defaults, field action, provider. Maybe we're not going to find that. Let's search just for columns editor instead of searching for the whole thing. Nope, it's not present here. All right, so let's search for this edit selected. That might be a better approach in this module CMS. Nope, and there's nothing listed here. So the next place we should go is to module UI. And I'm going to drop down here. Search for edit selected. There we go. We found a function here. So we see our edit, we see edit selected, selections, etc., etc. All right. So now what I suggest we do is come back into our page here and see our sources. And all of this, and as I'm working through this, all of this is going to be really helpful for you as you pass the test. This is what it takes, being curious as well as doing things in order to be able to, and again, get enough information together to be able to pass this test. And so we're going to come into our Chrome developer tools and search for, or open up Magento UI. And remember, that matches the friendly name Magento UI that is specified in registration.php. And then what is the file path past that? So view base web JS. You'll see the JS right here matches the JS up here. Grid editing editor. Grid editing editor. Excuse me. All right. Let's search for edit selected. Okay, fine. That does not. Oh, there we go. All right. So I believe we can cancel. Okay. So we have these 2 selected. Let's click on Actions, Edit, and see exactly what is happening here in this window. This get selections. Oops, we need to pull this back out. Oh, nice. Okay, that did not work. I guess we have to have this window open first. All right. Let me close out of this. Actions, edit. All right, there we go. So now let's step in. This selections, which I think selections is, yep, that selections is observable. And observable means it flows through the system, and it flows through Knockout and will automatically update different places. So selections is observable. Hey, Ernest, great point here. You can find the specific script quicker in Chrome Developer Tools by pressing Command O, entering the file name. I did not know that, and I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, so get page selections, and we have our selections here of being 5 and 4. This corresponds to the IDs that were selected here. This elements each, it's going to go through if it doesn't contain, okay. For each, this edit, let's step in here. Record ID, great. And so this is again in our editor. Record.active, okay, so it's changing the observable value here. Yep, and then initialize record. Perfect. Okay, so again, Nothing special there, but that is how the editing works. Awesome. All right. So again, basic idea as far as how editing works here. But I think we're just gonna axe the whole mass action thing because we don't need that. But again, it's good to review this how this works. All right. So columns name order export columns. Again, the name is not that important other than it being used in other places in this UI component. Okay, so you see the editor config, select provider, order export list, order export columns dot IDs. Very good. Yes, observables always confuse me too, but I found that actually as I got into as I was using Vue.js, it kind of helped me make a little more sense. Again, it still comes in and out of my fuzziness, but that really helped help things make more sense. And they're really cool. They're really cool when they work right. But they can also be a bit of a pain when they don't work right. All right. So now we see, looks like the ability to configure or to be able to edit these different rows. All right. So client config, we have our save URL. If we were allowing inline editing of this particular record, we would go create our URL for that. And I think, let's come up to see inline edit real quick. Inline edit. Okay, so it takes our items, runs through them, filters it out, looks like validates it, and saves it. So again, pretty easy as far as what that does. Validate before save. All right, index field again. If we were, this matches the index field of our CMS page table here. Our select provider. You'll notice that order export list. This is the name of our UI component, or how to address it to actually get to this UI component. I don't know why it's duplicated, but it is. And then we have order export columns, which is the child here. We see our column's name, and then we see .IDs. And we see how that matches our selection column of IDs. So again, making things match is far more important than naming things right with UI components. Things have to match and work together. And that's the #1 reason why I see things just don't work often, is because they don't match. So I'm going to do my best to try to make things match, but it still is easy to miss. All right. Child defaults, field action. All right. A couple things to call out here. The order export list, order export columns editor. Let's see if we can find where that is. Nope. All right. So the provider is, I think it is referencing this editor config here. The row, this is evaluating this. This means this is referencing the data associated with this, and then the row index. So again, that's how you would compose that. Okay, I think we can actually access whole settings configuration here, but again, it's good to run through that. Selection name, we're not going to even have a mass select on there here. All right, so now we are creating our columns. This is where it gets pretty easy to do. So column name is ID, and let's come back to our export. This is basically raw information as it comes in from the database. So column name is ID. We'll leave it like that. Column name is title. So we can do order ID. This would be a good thing to swap out in the future. And if we have time, we can walk through exactly how to do that using like a join or something along those lines. We'll change this out to order ID. But first, let's at least get it working along with raw data. Ship on. Now, this is a date. How do we do dates in Magento? Well, anytime that we can find an example of some other configuration of a date, the better. So when I think of dates, what would be a date? Where would be a date listed in UI components? Date listed in UI components would probably be in the order grid. So using our intuition now, let's come into module sales, view, admin HTML, UI component, and sales order grid. Again, yes, I've remembered this from the past, but we remember that orders are associated with the sales module. And then we also know that UI components are found in view admin HTML UI component. And then just looking through this list here, sales, it's going to be the sales order grid. So let's open this up and let's search for, was it created at? Yep. Okay, so I think we can literally copy this definition out of here. And we will swap this one out. So instead of created at, it'll be ship on. Now notice a couple of configurations here. First, we have our class. And this is how we render. Come on. There we go. This is how this is rendered. The data is sent or rendered to the front end UI component. All right, so we see we have a filter details right here, and it looks like it converts it out to the locale for the admin user. Prepare data source. So all of this is going to provide a better date experience for the front end user. But ultimately, we can easily create our own column component and render or configure whatever we want to do in this case. Yes. So like, for example, prepare data source. So we say if is set data source data item. So the value is coming from the database going to the front end. We're going to iterate through those. Item this get data name, and this get data name is right here. So basically, you have access to the data that is or the configuration in XML. You have access to that, and here it is going through. It looks like if data's name is, or the value, if the value is not null, basically, or in date format, it's going to format it as YMDHIS. So it's basically gonna as a neutral configuration for this. We also have our grid columns date front end UI component. I think this is the right one. Yep. Okay, so we have our defaults for the default date format, configuring the date format, and then getting the label for this as well. Okay. So again, that's a great little great example for, again, creating, utilizing existing functionality. So filter date range, data type. All right, let's say ship on. Whoopsie, I think I copied it more than I should have there. All right, next one is exported at. This is another date, so we're just going to drop in another value here. Okay. And just to say this, next time we get together, if we want to talk more about UI components, if that is enough of a weakness that we still want to have more conversation, I am more than happy to do that. And I think a great place to do that is also to dive into the front end. So talking about the checkout, talking about, again, just initializing components on the front end. Now, actually, as I think about it, what we're talking about here is very, very pertinent to the exams. If we start getting into the checkout a little bit, actually, so that would be good to talk about. But if we're just initializing UI components on the front end, that's not going to be as applicable to the exams. All right. We don't need the editor in here either. Let's come down. We'll copy our order ID again because our last field is merchant notes. Oh, look at that. We had dates in here as well. Either way. Okay, I'm going to delete most of this out. And we don't need actions either. Actually, but we want to talk about whoopsie. We do want to talk about actions. So I'm going to leave that in for just a minute. Merchant notes. I will say, actually, just one thing to throw out there. We talk a lot about checkout config in the expert developer course. So if you need immediate help on that, that course is really, really goes really deep on this checkout stuff. But if you can wait for 2 weeks, then we will at least spend an hour talking about that as well. I'd be more than happy to, again, help you out, talk about whatever you all want to specifically focus on. But my initial focus was on the most difficult areas of the exam, areas that people consistently got the lowest marks on. Okay, finally, we have our actions. So our actions would be things that can be done. Well, actually, let me show you an example. Come over here. Cancel. Action. These are our actions that are available here. So you'll notice in pretty much every instance, this is referencing an external PHP class to render these. And we come down here and data source for each one of those. And basically, it's going to create and pass in action URL. So we create our URL, our label, and this label template as well. So it gives you really good control as far as, okay, maybe edit is available for this one, maybe it is not available for this one. In this case, I don't think we even need actions. Again, really basic UI component. We're going to delete that out. Okay, we need to change this. Actually, we don't even need an add button either. This is just a read-only listing. All right. We'll see if we're going to have to do some troubleshooting, but I think listing filters, I'm just double checking this. It is really good to double check. Otherwise, you might get yourself into trouble because we missed something, but I think we're going to just go ahead and clear the cache and refresh it. Matthias asked about which course talks about the checkout. That is the Expert Developer course. Expert Developer is where we go very deep into checkout. Actually, the project in Expert Developer is creating a gift card module. And to be frank, as I was thinking through like what project are we going to tackle, gift card module is one of the ideas on the list, and it was the last idea in the world that I wanted to touch, simply because it's complex, it's difficult. We're going to run into some challenges, and I did run into challenges. I just put it that way. Inventory, there was some weird stuff we had to work through, but came out on the other end, and I think there was a lot of good, solid information and help that is available in there. All right. Jawad asked, what tool are you using for database, please? I'm using a Mac, but I am using what's called SQL Ace, SEQUEL Ace, ACE. There was a previous program that I used that was called SQL Pro, but that one it's no longer supported. But SQL Ace now has support, so I'm not exactly sure what happened there. All right, I think we're making progress, but it says not registered handle order export list data source. Okay, how would we troubleshoot something like that? Well, let's come back into our module CMS, view admin HTML UI component, the original file here, search for, data underscore source. All right. And so how do we find this out past just our XML file here? Well, it never hurts to do a search through the entire module for this particular name. All right, so we see data source in CMS page listing, CMS page. These are all UI components, so none of those are going to help. But I do see two references to etsy.di.xml. Interesting. This kind of makes me think that we need to we have some extra wiring that needs to happen here. So let's review how this works. And Ernest, PHP Storm also has a database client built in. Although it's nice, it still is. Yes, the database client in PHP Storm I've honestly used very little, just because I like SQL. So maybe there could be a performance boost by using that. Wow, Simon uses the command line. Good for you, Simon. I am not there. I like being able to easily browse tables. All right, so I think we need to copy some more code in here. All right, let's come back into our, oh, we don't have a DIXML file. So let's go create a DIXML file. We'll drop that in, and then we'll also pick up our boilerplate. Okay, so our name is, this is the collection factory, data provider collection factory. Collections is a list of arrays. And now this seems to match. Oh, man. This one seems to match our data source name here. What if we just drop that in like that? Now, we have this class here. So can we just use our existing collection? Well, I'm not 100% sure. It's possible, but no, I do not think so. Okay, so how are we going to then map this together? Well, what we can do is we see this extends page collection. We can go create our own UI component collection. And that is what I am going to suggest we do here. I think there is a way to make it, to do it, and there's another way to do this, but again, sticking with the Magento CMS module, we're just going to go create our own. So order export, we can come into here, model, resource model, order export details collection. Now, what we need to do here is we need to create a, what's called the grid collection. So, excuse me, adding a little bit of information or wrapping this grid with some extra methods here. Oh, continuing on our conversation about MySQL clients. Got some opinionation there going on. That's great. That's great. I love it. It's great to hear different, all the different perspectives here. All right. So basically, as I'm thinking about this, I'm not sure there's a reason why I wouldn't just implement search result interface ourselves. So let's just do that. Implement search result interface. Oop, we got a couple of here. API search. Let's see here. Oops. Did I copy? Yep. Search result interface. And let's just copy these values in. Again, just more or less boilerplate as well. Okay. I think, yep, that satisfies everything. Our red warnings went away. Aggregations. So let's go find what aggregations is. Okay, so it's just a private variable here. We'll need to return this. All right. Looks like that pretty much satisfies exactly what is happening here. All right, so in that case, we're just going to drop this in and wire that up. Go flush our cache. And I think this hopefully should be enough to make it work. Okay, one thing to double check here is, excuse me, collection factory. I'm going to find that again here. Okay. We might also be able to use a virtual type on this, but we're just going to stick with this for right now. Okay, refresh our page, and hopefully this error goes away, and either we'll get another error, or maybe it will just immediately start working. Let us see. Any questions while we're waiting on this to reload? Any questions? Okay, invalid arguments applied for each. Let's come and find where this is loaded. Jawad, no, I do not. Well, I put in a couple of videos a while ago about that, but I do not have a series as of recently about that. So we might pull together a few more of those. Let's see here. Command L for jump to a specific line. Okay, so this will be interesting. Search results, get item. So let's turn Xdebug on. Okay. Let's get past that. All right. So our item model order export details, and for some reason it's checking to see if item get custom attributes. Well, based off this error, invalid arguments supplied for each. Don't think, well, yeah, it's going to return null simply because we have not added get custom attributes to our model. So probably the easiest thing to do would be to add a public function get custom attributes. Now, there could be a better way to do this, but again, we're keeping it simple just from the aspect of, again, getting into UI components and learning how to do that. Okay. Well, this is a very positive step here. Okay. It is a very positive step, with the exception that we're not getting any data out of this. So what are we to do there? Well, I am guessing this comes back to our issue with right here. Item get custom attributes. So basically, item data, this is how the item data is populated through get custom attributes. So an easy solution, easy fix for that would be to return this get data. And let's try to refresh and okay. Not 100% yet. So attribute get attribute code, attribute get value. So yeah, let's go and take a look and see how the CMS page module deals with this, and maybe we'll have some inspiration here. Page get custom attributes. It's not listed on this one. So abstract model get custom attributes. All right, so what I'm going to suggest now, so there's something I have wired up incorrectly in this. What it is, I'm not 100% sure, but an easy way to go figure this out is to go into our content pages and see exactly how this is rendered in this case. All right, so Simon asked, Joseph, how long would it take you to do this if you were building it for a client? Usually, and I've done this enough that it actually, it's just funny. This is get custom attributes is an issue I have not had to deal with like ever. Normally, the data just straight up loads in. Normally, building a simple form takes an hour or two. It's usually really easy. But again, if we start running into problems like what we're dealing with here, it can take a little bit longer. All right, so our item is a UI component data provider document. And we have the details here. So there is something that I wired up incorrectly. So let us go figure out what is happening here. So search result get items. So what is search result? Search result is this page grid collection. So by taking this shortcut, that is how I started creating some problems. Okay, SCDIXML. All right, so what I'm going to suggest is let's try creating a virtual type that then satisfies all these arguments here. So let's come back into our SwiftOtter study DIXML. All right, so let's just try this. Virtual type name. So this extended block, okay. Nope, but that's not going to work either because we're going to need the other one. So we're just going to go mimic exactly how the other one worked. I think there was a way to do the virtual type on this. I cannot remember. I'll try to post that out if I come up with that. All right, so let's, instead of just modifying that, let's come into collection. We'll delete out search implements that. Clean all that up. And now we'll add a new one, collection grid. Just like the other one, I caught myself into trouble when I strayed away from the other one. So order, export model, resource model. Wow, this gets so long. Order export details, class collection grid, extends collection. Implements grid collection, search results interface. All right, now we can, let's just actually copy in these values here. And we will go clean out, return this. I think that's actually good. Okay, so come back up here. Personally, I cannot stand doc blocks on constructors. I have to flatten this out too, so bear with me. Technically, I would also go and alias every one of these, like entity factory, but again, we won't take time for that. Okay, so we're going to just leave this as is, and then we're going to come down into our DIXML type of collection grid, command alternate shift C, copies the class name. Main table is CMS block. No, it is not. It is sales order export. All right, and then our resource model is order export details. Yep, that is the one. Awesome. Well, let's go try this now and see if we get data loaded in. Okay. Couple questions here. Powan asks, can anyone suggest studying efficiently as I'm going to the office also? Powan, basically, I suggest studying like we are studying today. It's going to take this process of working through the sample project. So if you say, okay, I'm going to create a UI component, you go create a UI component. You fight through it. Oopsie, wrong one. You fight through it, and wrong one again. Sheesh. Yeah, you go fight through it. You go figure out these errors. These errors, as I am experiencing them, teach far more than what one can just read in the dev docs. Dev docs is good as far as providing new ideas or global or knowledge, but this stuff that we fight through just minute by minute, that is the stuff that's really critical. So when you go into the office, I suggest talking to your manager, asking to make sure that you can take 15 minutes, maybe on the clock, and come in 15 minutes early. So then you got a half an hour every day of studying. Make sure you do not turn on Slack. You do not open up email. And do everything that to shut out distractions and dig in and start studying. So experience is the key to pass the test. You have to have that. And there's no better way to get experience than actually getting in there, rolling up your sleeves and doing it. So I think I'm going to have a couple of debug sessions here. Well, I refreshed so many pages to do this, so we'll get this done here. This is the one I really want here. We're going to... Actually, both of these might pull it up. That'd be funny. Oh, okay. Let's clean this. Okay. Argument 1 passed to this. Okay. Let's see here. Argument 1 passed to our search provider. Search results must implement search result interface export collection. Oh, I think I must have forgotten to update a DIXML listing here. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Look at that. See, that is where these naming and everything must be compatible with each other. Here we go. Oops. Andy asked, what do you recommend to learn or write SQL queries and why? Great question, and I like the why in there as well. Boy, that is a really good question. I think the best is to well, honestly, I'm just going to say experience is probably the best. So don't be afraid. Oopsie. Don't type error when creating object. All right. Don't be afraid to, how do I say this? To get in there and to write SQL queries. Use the MySQL dev docs. Really, really helpful. And get in there and learn and work on that. That is what is absolutely required to get into learning it. So that's about the best I can say. There's a lot of tutorials, so look up, select, look up grouping, look up joins. Unions I use those very, very rarely in these contexts. Let's see here. Sorting. Learning ascending versus descending. Ascending means the numbers are going to get greater as they go down. Descending means the biggest number is at the top. Things like that is what is necessary. So exception, argument, too few arguments to this. On line 36. That's interesting. Well, let's just... Again, that's where copying and pasting code can get you into trouble sometimes. All right. Logger, fetch strategy, event manager, store manager, metadata pool, main table, event prefix, event object, resource model, connection, resource. Phew. Okay. Let's see if we can refresh this again. Writing complex queries easily for Magento joining. That's a good one. Maybe we just pull out, maybe if we want, and I've been working through like how can I better help people with certifications and all that stuff. The writing queries, Magento queries is a really important subject, and it's something I actually love doing. So maybe I'll just pull together a webinar here in a couple weeks, and we're just going to sit down and write a whole bunch of queries and begin work through that aspect of it. So that why don't we plan on that? I'll take a note and we'll get that working. In the meantime, I hope you all noticed that this has loaded in. So this works. Now, the one thing I was hoping to get to and we did not end up having time is our order ID. I want to get that swapped out. And actually, that'll kind of tie into SQL queries too. So we might just end up finishing that out next week and then going on to another subject of the in our preparation for studies next week. So we have definitely gone over a little bit of our time, but I hope you have found this beneficial. You'll see that I struggle through these UI components too. I've written what I feel like quite a lot of them, but I still can struggle in building them out. So it's just part of the process, and that creates more experience, more learning, and it's easier to battle our way through them and solve these problems. So I appreciate you all hanging in here and chatting and working through all these problems together. And we have a UI component that works. I will be committing this code, pushing it up, so then you are able to review it and hopefully copy and learn from it yourself. Maybe if a couple of you want to, you can dive into creating the order, swapping out the order ID too. That would be really cool to see that. But otherwise, if not, we're going to focus in on that in our next developer segment. One other thing to note, and I would appreciate if you would drop me a DM on Slack, if you would shoot me an email. I'm actually considering splitting up our certification challenge meetings. So this is the kind of developer study group, but I'm considering splitting up those meetings into a business practitioner segment and a developer segment. And so I can especially focus in on advice for each one of those segments as we go through it. So basically what I'm thinking is that it'd be 8 o'clock Central Time. So right now it's -6 UTC for, I think, -6. That'll change here in a little bit. But 8 o'clock is for business practitioners, going till 8:30, so like a half an hour for business practitioners, and then 8:30 till 9:15, somewhere in there for developers. So that is a possible change that is coming down the pipeline, just because business practitioner and developers, I've tried to keep those as similar as possible, but they're so different. I just don't think it's not worked as well as I've hoped it will. So that is a change that is coming down the pipeline. That is good. We will get into writing SQL queries in Magento. Absolutely. I will tell you every trick I know as far as how to do that. Charles, your struggle is less than an hour. My struggle is usually several hours. Yep. Well, hopefully this will help accelerate your several hours in the future. And we can boil it down to 1 hour here. So that is good. I appreciate you all hanging with me for this. This is good. This is how we learn. We fight through these problems, and we come out the victor on the other end. Some might take us a little longer, but we will eventually keep shortening that out a little bit. Very good. Well, any further questions before we close this live stream down for today? Remember, I'm always grateful if you would subscribe to this channel. It helps you also be able to not forget that these live streams that are coming up. And I'm looking forward to doing more of these. I really enjoy hanging out with you all and sharing what I know and learning from you all as well. Hey, I think Ernest pointed out the Command O in Chrome Developer Tools. So that was really helpful. I appreciate that. Cool. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any other comments come in. It was a terrific being with you here today. I wish you the very best. Looking forward to chatting next Saturday. We'll talk about some certification inspiration, and maybe we'll actually be able to get into some SQL queries too. So look forward to that. We'll see you later. It was good being with you guys. Thank you.